Hello, health seekers. Welcome to another episode of the Keto Pro Podcast with myself, Richard Smith. Today, I'm joined by a very good friend of mine, Mr. Alan Reeves. Alan, welcome on board again.
Hello. Back again.
Very familiar face within the team. And today, we are absolutely honored to get Dr. Sarah Myhill back on. Dr. Sarah Myhill kindly came into our school group to present a Q&A recently. One of the shorts off the back of that has reached over 1 million views. So this is proof. The proof is in the steak, as we say, not so much the pudding, that the information that people like Dr. Sarah Myhill are putting out there is absolutely invaluable. So I think we're in for one hell of a treat. Dr. Sarah Myhill, welcome on board.
Thank you, Richard, for those lovely words. That's very kind of you.
No problem.
Nice to meet you, Sarah.
You too, Alan. Cheers.
I was only thinking of you last night because, of course, you're speaking at my retreat, and I was thinking I must arrange a Zoom with Dr. Sarah. And then Richard just messaged me today. It's strange how the universe just sorts things out.
Ask and he shall receive.
Exactly.
Don't ask, you don't get. Isn't it? It's funny how the way the universe works, isn't it, with energies? Something I'm looking into a lot recently, to be honest, in regards to energies and things. What you put out is what you get back, isn't it? But yeah, it's funny. Dr. Sarah Myhill, an expert in the world of nutrition. Look, you gave a fantastic talk and Q&A in the school community. Could you give us a brief introduction of what's brought you to where you are today? Obviously, you have a little story, in regards to what's brought you to what you teach and do today. So could you hit us with that? Fantastic.
Of course. I qualified as a doctor in 1981. I worked for 20 years in the National Health Service as a general practitioner. And then by the end of the 1990s, I realized that conventional medicine was not addressing root causes of problems. And I was interested in why my patients had high blood pressure, why they had migraine, why they had arthritis. And I was experimenting with diets and supplements and detox regimes and all sorts. My early workings were with allergy. And I realized that a huge number of people are allergic to the top three: dairy products, gluten, grains, and yeast. That improved many people. And then I realized that, sugar was a real problem, sugars and carbohydrates. In fact, I worked in Nottinghamshire for 10 years in a lovely area, Kirkby and Ashfield, just north of Nottingham. And I used to give them the lecture on sugar, and there'd be a bit of a pause, and they say, "Yep, sugar's the booger."
I'm from near there. I'm from South Derbyshire in Swadlincote.
Oh, yeah, Swadlincote. Amazing.
You've heard of it. What Jesus was wrapped in, I say.
Anyway, so by the end of the 1990s, I realized I didn't have the clinical freedoms that I needed to be a good doctor, because I actually got chastised because my prescribing budget was so low. I wasn't prescribing cholesterol drugs. I wasn't prescribing antidepressants. I wasn't prescribing arthritis drugs, because I was getting people, better through diet and supplements. But that was considered I was a bad doctor because, I didn't use drugs. Anyway, let's fast forward to the present day, because everybody wants to know, what diet should I eat? And all the treatment, the prevention and treatment of all disease starts with diet. If you're not prepared to do the diet, forget the rest. Now, whenever you have a difficult question, always go back to evolutionary biology. And the fact of the matter is, we evolved over hundreds of thousands of years as carnivores. We didn't evolve to become carnivore. We evolved because we were carnivore. And eating a carnivore diet gives us three essential nutrients. It gives us arachidonic acid, it gives us DHA, and it gives us iodine. And that is essential for our brains. One example of this, our nearest relative is the chimpanzee. All those years ago, millions of years ago, the chimpanzee brain was about 350 milliliters in size, and today it is 350 milliliters in size. Our brains grew to 1,700 milliliters in size, a massive growth. And that was because we had those three key foods, essential fatty acids and minerals, in order to allow that to happen. And as our brains evolved, so we became more sociable. We lived in tribes. That made us more effective hunters. Our population took off, and as they say, the rest is history. So The reason why the Carnivore Adjust is such a fantastic start is, first of all, it's low allergen. You know, I have got patients who are allergic to meat, but it's very unusual. The commonest allergen is probably to eggs. On the carnivore diet, I know you guys sometimes allow dairy, but that is a major allergen. The second reason is, another major problem is that our food is intrinsically toxic. If you're eating, a lot of vegetables or a lot of non-meat foods, then you are eating poisons. Okay, there are going to be bits in those foods that are good for us, and this is why we have evolved an amazing detox system, the liver and the kidneys, to deal with those poisons. But we now live in an increasingly toxic world, and whether you like it or not, you are poisoned. I've done lots of tests for toxic metals, lots of tests for pesticides and volatile organic compounds, and guess what? I've never seen a normal result. And on top of that, we have our social addictions, alcohol, cigarettes, whatever, caffeine. We have our prescription medications, they're all drugs. These all have to be detoxified in the liver. And so our detox systems are being overwhelmed. And much pathology is just driven by a simple poisoning. I don't know if you know of the amazing work by Professor Chris Exley, whose nickname is Mr. Aluminium. He will tell you that aluminium is involved in all the major brain pathologies: dementia, Parkinson's, probably motor neuron disease, probably multisystem atrophy, and so on. But it's not just aluminium, it's all the other heavy metals as well. So as we overload our system with all those poisons, we suddenly can't cope. And then the whole toxicity, the whole poisoning becomes much worse. So the carnivore diet is a low toxin diet. So that's a great start. And the third reason is, another major driver of pathology is the upper fermenting gut. So if you the upper gut, the gut is a tube, starts at the mouth, finishes at the anus, about 30 foot long. The first 25 foot of that gut should be sterile or near sterile. And of course, what allows that to happen is having a great acidic stomach. The stomach is an acid bath that just sterilizes everything that comes into it. But if you're eating sugars and carbohydrates all the time, and you're snacking, see, sugars and carbohydrates make you more hungry. They make you crave more sugars and carbohydrates. You get addicted to them. And people end up having breakfast, snack mid-morning, lunch, snack mid-afternoon, supper, munches in the evening. Their stomach is never empty. And you overwhelm the ability of the upper gut to remain sterile. And if the upper gut starts to ferment with bacteria and with yeast, that drives a whole host of other pathologies. First of all, those bacteria and yeast are fermenting sugars and carbohydrates to toxins, ethyl alcohol, propyl alcohol, butyl alcohol, aminoalkyl compounds, D-lactate, a whole heap of nasties that all have to be detoxified in the liver. The microbes themselves produce toxins. We get bacterial endotoxin, we get fungal mycotoxin, and that poisons us too. But I think that the single biggest driver of pathology is the microbes themselves. They get from the gut into the bloodstream. It's called microbial translocation. It's a well-recognized phenomenon. And they get stuck at distal sites. They get stuck in our joints where they drive arthritis, in our muscles where they drive fibromyalgia, in our arteries where they drive endocarditis, myocarditis, and blood vessel inflammation. In our muscles drive polymyalgia rheumatica. In the lining of the gut drive inflammatory bowel disease. In the lungs that drive intrinsic asthma, etc., etc., etc. But the most interesting one of all, and this is predicated on work done by a Japanese researcher called Nishihara. If you've got those fermenting microbes in the gut, you can have those microbes in the brain. And in the brain, they ferment neurotransmitters, things like adrenaline and serotonin and noradrenaline, into LSD and amphetamine-like substances. And this is probably the basis of psychosis. So a huge amount of psychiatric pathology, I think, is driven by allergy to microbes from the upper fermenting gut, and the microbes themselves, low-grade opportunistic infections, it's called, in the brain, which stops energy delivery mechanisms and produces all these abnormal neurotransmitters. And during all the 1940s, the 1950s, the 1960s, there were two wonderful psychiatrists, Dr. Karl Pfeiffer and Abram Hoffer. They published extensively, and they were not managing, they were curing, they were reversing schizophrenia, major psychoses, epilepsy, by dint of doing ketogenic diets. And then they've thrown some nutritional supplements as well. In particular, high dose vitamin B3 was very helpful. Fish oils were very helpful, and we now understand reasons why that was so good. So what I'm trying to say is that the gut is the starting point to prevent and treat absolutely everything. And if you're not sure which diet to start with, the carnivore diet is going to be the most frictionless route to recovery.
100%. 100%. I mean, it's that's one of the things that Alan and I will teach, is that healing the gut is job number one. And it's if the input is wrong, the output's wrong. It's so difficult for people to see that connection in regards to, well, it can't be what I eat. I've always eaten this way. But we are high performance sports cars, or jet planes. You wouldn't put petrol into a jet engine, or diesel into an F1 race car, and that's exactly what the human body is. We are high performance sports machines.
That's what I like about Dr. Sarah's energy delivery mechanism system failure. That every pathology is lack of energy or mitochondria to that particular organ or cell. I had a client yesterday, and he talked that he's always been on Adderall as a child, or it was Ritalin when he was in Europe. Now he's in America, it's on Adderall. I said, well, hopefully you can come off that once you get ketogenic.
Of course.
I said, because, and I referred to that you've got lack of energy to your brain.
Correct.
And I was just, thinking, I'm not a doctor, but I was thinking, what would Dr. Sarah say? Because lack of energy to the brain, I said, the wrong fuel going to your brain, so you can't concentrate. And as a child, when I was a kid, me being in my 50s, we didn't concentrate, but we wasn't labelled with an illness. We was just a naughty kid, and we got a smack over the hand with a ruler or thrown the chalk rubber at you. And I'm sure you remember that as well.
Showing your age now.
Yeah. And then we started listening, and maybe that's actually what kids need these days, rather than a medicine.
No, what kids need is a carnivore diet.
Yeah, exactly. But
real nutrition.
There was this other guy talking yesterday on a podcast how there was at the schools in America. Okay, children, it's time for your meds. Med time. And this is now in California, I think they were, and they come out and line up to take their meds, and they're like 8 years old. I mean, this is terrible. But so do you think I was correct by saying that he had lack of energy to his brain?
Absolutely. And the thing is, Alan, you are thinking like a mechanic, like an engineer. You're looking for root causes and diagnosing them. Doctors don't do that anymore. Medical education, they might be terribly clever people to get there, but it's not an education, it's a brainwashing. And what they are taught is these symptoms, that drug. Why? Follow the money. It's just so easy. And of course I'm gobby. I like talking a lot. And if I think something, I say it. But people like me get struck off by the General Medical Council because we're not following.
A lot of them hide behind, but I'm a physician. Are you? I've had that before, a text on a comment, but are you a physician? And I was like, well, no, I'm not the fourth biggest killer of people, but
it's now the biggest killer of people.
Oh, really?
Now, the biggest, a wonderful paper by Peter Gottschall, who set up the Cochrane Center in the 1980s, which oversees, looks at papers and say, are these good, are these bad, are these truthful, or whatever. But he got, and the Cochrane reports are, the gold standard of, is this a good study or not? It got infiltrated by Big Pharma, and they ended up sacking him. So he did this study in 2014. And in 2014, when he asked what kills people, prescription drugs, side effects, interactions were then, I think, the third greatest killer. He's just repeated that research, published in July 2024 with the Brownstein Institute. In America, drugs, overdoses, interactions, are now the number one killer in America.
Oh, wow. So I was
number one.
Was almost right. So, I'm not a physician, thankfully. And
you're much safer not being one, I can tell you that.
Well, of course, I've been binge watching your episodes all over YouTube and reading your book, Ecological Medicine, and implementing your systems as well with the vitamin C, the iodine, and the MSM. I've always took high dose vitamin D for the last 10 years. And
Fantastic.
the doctors are always telling me when I get my blood work, it's too high, stop taking it. And I haven't been ill for 10 years, as yourself, 35 years. And I used to get ill all the time. 4 times a year, I would have a throat infection and a really bad tonsillitis sort of infection and feel terrible. Nothing for 10 years. If I ever felt a bit off for one day, I eat raw garlic cloves. Suck a lemon then because you stink. But and I take more vitamin D when I feel like that. And then the next day I'm normally fine. But when I was reading your book or hearing you say, I had visions of my dad. He passed away from mesothelioma, I told you, nearly 20 years ago. And you mentioned something about maybe the polio vaccine and something then. Yes. Maybe we can come back to that because I've never read that before. But I remember my dad used to get these big carbuncles on his neck. He was a welder. And this old man said to him, mass doses of ascorbic acid. And I was a kid. I remember my dad dissolving them fizzy capsules.
Yeah.
And he was always drinking them.
Fantastic.
And he got rid of the lumps. Fantastic. And of course, that brought back that memory. I thought, oh, interesting. And I've read of cancer being when they're on intravenous, 50,000 milligrams an hour going in. And of course, they banned that because it's cheap.
Correct. Too cheap and too effective.
Exactly. So it was interesting. I've been using the vitamin C ever since because that is something, again, linked to my dad and what you said. So, but I've spoke to other carnivores and they say, oh, you don't need vitamin C when on the carnivore diet. But it's not just because you need it for your scurvy, it's for killing the microbes.
That's a fabulous point, Alan, and it illustrates a point that most nutritional supplements can be used in at least 3 ways. So let's illustrate that with vitamin C. You can take 30 milligrams a day, and that stops you from getting scurvy. Okay, and of course you're going to get more than that on the carnivore diet. Then we can take it in gram amounts for optimal biochemical function, to deal with the upper fermenting gut, improve antioxidant status, protect us from cancer, etc., etc., etc. And then we can use it in tens of grams, this isn't intravenous, this is orally, to deal with acute infection. It's the same with vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is one of my favourite multitasking tools. I use lots of B12. Now, the government recommended daily amount is 30 micrograms. You know, that might just stop you getting pernicious anemia.
What, B12?
This is vitamin B12.
Yeah. I read that off your thing this morning because mine's off the chart again, but I don't supplement.
That's fine. That's where it should be. We need good levels of B12 to normalize our homocysteine, and that's essential for our methylation cycle, which is like a healing repair. It's a toolkit. And then we can use B12 in super high doses by injection as an anti-inflammatory. So it's a fantastic treatment.
I have a funny story with that. I was on the Generation Game, remember with Jim?
No!
Yeah, I was one of
Bruce
the models.
Forsyth?
No, it wasn't Brucey, it was Jim. I'm not that old. I was a kid though. So I was one of the models that was going to be thrown something at, I don't remember. But they're all queuing up. And they called him Dr. Death. He was the doctor for BBC. And they're all having injections. I said, what's that? And he said vitamin B12. I said, oh, what does that do? It gives you energy. Let's have one in here. So I had one and I felt it straight away. That means I must have been deficient. And I said, how much are them? He said, well, the BBC pays £75 a shot. I said, my mate can get them for like £1. He said,
correct.
He said, so can I. So no wonder our TV license is expensive.
I was just about to say the same thing.
Yeah.
It was exactly the same in the NHS. When I had a patient home who needed oxygen and I couldn't persuade, I wanted to prescribe it, but the powers that be wouldn't let me. So I said, well, go and buy it. The NHS wanted to charge them £330 for one oxygen cylinder. I had a friend of mine who's in a diving club, so I said, I'll get you some oxygen from the diving club, 25 quid.
Yeah. In your book, it said about getting the injection, but you can't just buy injections, can you, over the counter?
Yeah, I sell them at my website.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
anybody can get them. I sell the bottles of B12, the syringes and needles, and then a little needle disposal pot for cutting the needles off, and it's as easy as pie. And so many of my patients with fatigue syndromes love it.
yeah,
If you've got a
yeah.
foggy brain, it's a great starting point.
Oh, interesting. I'd say mine is off the range, but I don't listen to ranges anyway. I generally, because I think there's some sick people.
Yeah, but the point is that all that range is that that's the range that stops you getting pernicious anemia.
Yeah.
It's the absolute bare minimum.
Mm.
And it may well not be sufficient to normalize your homocysteine, and it certainly won't be sufficient to work as an anti-inflammatory. So I never ever measure vitamin B12 levels. I want my patients to spend their money on the best food they can get, the best meat they can get, and a few B12 jabs. That's going to do them a lot more good than having a test that will then be misinterpreted.
Interesting. Same with vitamin D. I remember Dr. Eric Serrano saying that one of his patients, if he took less than 85,000 IUs per day, he felt terrible. And they tested it. He went down to 50, felt terrible. Went back up to 85, he felt amazing. So where do we stand with vitamin D?
Vitamin D, we can use that, again in three ways, like B12 and vitamin C, as we've discussed. You can use it in tiny doses to stop you getting rickets or osteomalacia. You can use it in normal doses for optimal biochemical function, but you can also use it in super high doses as an anti-inflammatory. And this has been established by a lovely doctor from Brazil called Dr. Cicero Coimbra, Coimbra. And he uses vitamin D in 50,000 IU a day, 80,000 IU a day to treat conditions associated with inflammation. Works really well for multiple sclerosis, for example. It also helps to damp down many autoimmune conditions. Now, the only rider is you have to keep an eye on the serum calcium. Now, if you do the regime properly, and they're all available online, or I can send it to you, and you don't have dairy products because they're too high in calcium, and you take some vitamin K and you drink some water, hypercalcemia occurs in about 1% or less than 1% of people taking it. So it's a very safe intervention, but you must check your calcium. Now, you don't have to go for a doctor to do that. You can go onto Amazon. There's a do-it-yourself kit to check your serum calcium. So you can. This is an intervention you can do at home yourself very safely and get great results.
Amazing. I've been studying lately about glycation and advanced glycation end product. That the sugar obviously is terrible, and fructose being 10 times worse. Correct. And then you produce something called methylglyoxal, which is 100 times worse at glycating. And this professor was talking about this is, again, a driver of all pathology, glycating the cells, causing heart disease, causing damage to the glycocalyx and the endothelium, correct, causing heart disease. And people can also eat their meat, though, and glycate it by overcooking it and burning it. So he said the way that cooking is very important. Of course, boiling or slow cooking is the best. Is that something you agree with? I think the thumbs up.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, and the biochemistry is not difficult. Sugar is sticky in the hand and it's sticky in the body.
Yeah.
And it sticks onto things, and we give it this fancy name glycation, but all it means is sugar is sticky stuff. And this is why it's so important to keep the blood sugar down. I learned an astonishing statistic recently, which is, we have about 5 litres of blood circulating to keep us, functioning. And the amount of sugar that should be in the bloodstream is about a teaspoonful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
at any one time.
tiny. Now, a tiny bit of sugar, yes, it is, essentially, it does lots of good things in the body. But, it illustrates the point, you don't have to eat much sugar for the blood sugar to go spiraling high. And I know I'm an addict, and I know I'm a sugar and a carbohydrate addict, and like all addicts, I can deal with that by saying no to the first mouthful. But if I say yes to the first mouthful, I want a second and a third and a fourth. And I have an addiction test for foods, which is that if I can have one mouthful of but not finish the packet, it's safe to have in the house. So I wouldn't dare have a bar of chocolate in the house because I'd be thinking, I just fancy.
I used to be like that with the wine. If I had one glass of wine, I had the whole bottle.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
snap.
Correct. And what do alcoholics celebrate? They celebrate complete abstinence.
Yeah. Well, I've got a few friends that are alcoholics, pretty much all of them in London, and they took me to AA. I've been there before, and he could never work me out because I wasn't an alcoholic per se, but I just liked to party, and I was that party life and soul that once I started, I never stopped. And so I abstained when I went keto for 8 years, not one drop. And
fantastic.
And now I can have a glass of wine if I want and put the lid back on. I've controlled that addiction. I don't think you beat it. I think you control it.
Correct.
I don't think. Sorry, Sarah, go on. I used to drink every night. What began with a glass of wine led to two. Two's nearly a bottle, so I began drinking a bottle, and then one bottle turned into two. Yeah. At the peak, I was drinking 3 bottles of wine every night. So technically an alcoholic.
Oh, that is, yeah.
And this wasn't even nice wine. This was the cheap 3 bottles for a tenner in a corner shop, you know, because I was drinking every night. And I felt like I needed it. I felt because, you know, you make these excuses. You drink because you've had a hard day at work. And it's a slippery slope, isn't it? So it comes back to what you were saying, Sarah, that one mouthful or that one bite leads to 2 and so on. But I no longer drink at all. And I don't feel that I need to manage. In fact, I used to collect limited edition whiskey. So Sarah will know about Penderyn. I owned every limited edition that they ever produced. I still have the first 3 productions they ever made. I used to buy the limited edition bottle. You're talking £300 to £400 a bottle. I would buy 2 of them. I would keep one to collect, and I would keep one for special occasions. And I would drink now and again. Now, this was at the point where I was on my ketogenic journey, but I loved drinking whiskey. I used to love the whole experience with it. I could smell, you know, the aromas, and I became quite the connoisseur in the world of whiskey. Now, I used to indulge in these bottles, you know, just a little tipple now and again. I used to cut the glass to heat it up to release the aromas and everything. It was a whole process, you know, a whole ritual. I poured one, maybe 4 years ago, and this was a very, very good quality whiskey. Poured it into the glass, and it was Christmas time, about 4 years. It may even been 5 years. And I held it to my nose, and I thought, this is incredible. Sipped it. No, I poured it back into the bottle, and I have not drunk it since. Wow. And I don't feel... Do you know, there's... I think the mechanisms in which the alcohol is processed and received in the body change when you become fully keto adapted, and the taste changes.
Drunk quicker when you're ketogenic, you get drunk quicker. You can't
initially because the body isn't used to consuming the alcohol, but the liver becomes so efficient when you start to drink a little. This is what I found on the ketogenic journey. You know, in the early days, the first few glasses would hit me for 6. But I would quickly recover. An hour or 2 later, I would be able to drink lots and lots and lots and it not cause the effect that it once did, which is dangerous in one respect because that alcohol is still causing the damage. But my requirement for it and my need and desire is completely zero. I could quite happily never drink again. After the last few times I've tried to drink alcohol, they no longer taste the same to me and my body no longer wants them at all. Sugar's a different story, chocolate in particular.
Yeah, well, back to Dr. Sarah's supplement regime. I've been taking the MSM, and I know you were sort of, and I watched your podcast. You said we're experimenting with it. That could have been 2 years old, that episode. So how long have you been researching the MSM? Because that's sulfur. We're all sulfur deficient. That helps us make glutathione. Now, I had a client that was taking glutathione, and it was really expensive. And I said, from what I've read, you don't even digest it. You break it down, and it's a waste of money, expensive pee.
No, I don't entirely agree with that. When we did our study looking at mitochondrial function tests in people who had fatigue syndromes, glutathione was one of the things that we measured routinely. And if somebody was deficient, when I rechecked, the levels came up reliably well. So I'm sure it is doing good, but it's a bit expensive, as you say. And, you know, all my patients, you know, are not wealthy. So we have to spend
BBs.
our money in the wisest and most efficient way. And that's why I love MSM, because it corrects sulfur levels. As you say, we're all deficient, and it does much other good as well.
So I'm taking the 3 grams at the minute, what you said. Can we go, you can go up for 3 months, I think you said, or 6 months. You can go higher to 30 grams.
That's right. I've been following the work of an American doctor called Dr. G.I. Janelle. Now, she's been using MSM for the gut problems, because MSM in the gut has the very desirable property in the upper gut, which is aerobic, full of oxygen, it kills microbes. But in the lower gut, which is anaerobic, it feeds them, it acts like a prebiotic. So that's a very good double whammy for the gut. And the second thing that it does is it greatly improves the quality of something called fourth phase water, or exclusion zone water. And that essentially reduces the friction in the system. So the reason I can wave my arm around like that, it doesn't sound like bits of sandpaper grating together, is because sulfur groups enhance exclusion zone water and render every surface frictionless, so it can all flow.
So that would help constipation.
I beg your pardon?
Constipation, that may help.
Exactly. Yeah. Because this is why, people say to me, oh, carnivore diet, aren't I going to get constipated because there's no fiber there? No, that's not the issue. I think constipation is a friction issue. So you might not produce a daily turd, but that doesn't matter. So long as it comes out effortlessly, that is the key point. Wow. And if you look at the turds of all other mammals, horses, mice, they're little bobbles, aren't they? That okay, they might be stuffed together, but each one is a little cannonball that comes out, and it comes out in a frictionless way. And so I think that when you're true carnivore and you might have your bowels open every other day, but it's effortless. You might get some cannibals coming out, but that's fine.
Yeah, 100%. What are your thoughts, Sarah, in regards to the MSM? An important protocol, maybe predominantly in the early stages, to heal the body and help increase glutathione. Do you find that the long-term ketogenic and carnivore clients that you work with no longer require that, because ketones themselves increase glutathione, which is known as the body's master antioxidant? There are lots of others which are arguably more powerful, but it's do you find that their requirement may be less for that as they become deeper?
I'm sure that's the case. And the fact actually, I do fewer and fewer tests these days because they're expensive. So I rarely measure glutathione these days. But the point is, when I'm seeing somebody for the first time, or someone like yourselves are on this journey, if you've come from a background of decades of a Western diet, you will be deficient. I can guarantee you'll be deficient in the B 100%. Vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin D, iodine, sulfur, vitamin K, and so on. So I have a basic package of supplements just to get you on the starting blocks, as I call it. And remember, if you've got an upper fermenting gut, which you will have if you're having loads of sugars and carbs, then those bugs are in the queue for these microbes, for these micronutrients. So, if your stomach's full of bacteria and yeast, lining the stomach, when you eat vitamins and minerals, they'll gobble them up first because they are as in need of them as we are. So the first step is to stop feeding little wretches with a carnivore diet, low carb diet. Then you kill little wretches off with vitamin C and iodine, both contact kill all microbes. And then you get the benefit from the nutritional supplements. And then you get well. And once you're at a stage when the brain is working really well, the body's working really well, and you've got energy function through the day, then, as I say, you can do a deal with the devil. You probably don't need to have all this or all that or all the other. I'm always saying to people, spend your money on the best food you can possibly get. That is the priority. 100%. Grass-fed meat, organic vegetables if you're having any, or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you made an important point when we first came on the call about we are carnivore, and we know this from nitrogen isotope testing without question. On the scale, we're higher than the lion and the tiger. It's we're not just carnivore, we're hyper carnivore, which means that we would have consumed meat anytime that we had access to it. And not only this, we would have consumed other apex predators. And we're quite often touted as being hunter-gatherers, but that's not the case. We know without question now that we are carnivore. And it's one of the questions that I get quite often is, well, would we have eaten fruits and vegetables? And I think yes is the answer. I was on a call with
seasonal,
and again locally sourced. So there's well, I had a call with Dr. Chaffee yesterday, and we spoke about. So there are lots of people within the community who are coming away from ketogenic and carnivore lifestyles, and they're now suffering, but they're blaming their journey over the last 10 years. Oh well, I'm suffering with this now because I was keto and carnivore for 10 years. But these problems they've only come around since you've started to consume high levels of these toxic compounds again. Mast cell activation from consuming cruciferous vegetables and whatever else it is that they're consuming. But it's one of the reasons that I found with working with clients, and maybe you guys can both attest to this, is I've got a theory that during the summer months, so fruit comes into season in the towards the end of the summer, and we know that it's there to fatten us up for a cold winter. So fruit, fatten us up. Vegetables, fatten us up. Fantastic. I think there may be another reason for us from an ancestral perspective, because when we are exposed to high UV index, high UV index, it reduces or increases melanin, which reduces reactive oxygen species, ROS. Now, we look at these things as being bad and negative, but they're all there for a reason. Cholesterol is critically important. Cortisol is important. Insulin, glucose, reactive oxygen species, inflammation, all of these things, they are critically important, but we want them operating between the correct upper and lower limit. We don't want them to be too high, and we don't want them to be too low. And one of the theories that I come up with working with a number of clients back in 25, because we had a very warm summer, especially in Wales, Sarah, as you'll know, high UV index for a prolonged period of time. Lots of long-term, especially females, and I don't know why it's more to do with the women than men, but four or five of them came to me saying, look, they're having this undesirable urge for fruit. They've tried increasing the fat, they've tried increasing the protein, they've tried everything you can think of, all of the levers that we're told to pull. And these are people who are experienced ketogenic and carnivore people. They had to give in. They gave in. They consumed locally sourced seasonal fruit or locally sourced raw honey. Felt fantastic. When the weather subsided, they naturally came back off, and they were fine. And now all of them still carnivore on zero fruit. And I believe that we shouldn't be consuming fruit in the winter, by the way, especially from other parts of the world. And that's what we do, isn't it? We consume fruit all year round and from other countries.
Nail on the head. They got it from a farm. It was organic and it's in season. And
it's
then
locally sourced.
You eat strawberries in the winter from wherever. They're covered in glyphosate.
They're covered in glyphosate, which is blocking the shikimate pathway, causing all sorts of other issues with neurotransmitter production. But my theory with this is, as you mentioned earlier, Al, fructose far higher with glycation, even though the carbon double bond oxygen is a little bit further down. The split of the linear form of the fructose is more prominent than glucose, hence the reason it's more prone to glycation. But what this means is it goes through a process, creates, I think it's a Haynes reaction, isn't it, through fructose. We call it an Amadori reaction with glucose. It's a Haynes reaction when it comes to fructose. Yes. But the result is the same. It leads to an AGE, an advanced glycation end product, leads to the activation of a number of pathways, but two in particular. One is NFKB, which is inflammation. The other one is the NOx pathway, NADPH phagosome oxidase, which leads to a number of things alongside damaging DNA, causing inflammation and damaging other cells in the body. It leads to reactive oxygen species. So my theory behind this is that the fruit consumption during the higher UV index when we're on carnivore, because the reactive oxygen species is low and it's functioning between the correct upper and lower limit, high UV index, increase in melanin, reduces its reactive oxygen species, leads to reductive stress, which is just as problematic as oxidative stress. The fructose, the fruit, causes the reactive oxygen species, puts the carnivores back into an optimal upper and lower limit. Now, that's my theory. Like, it
makes sense.
Well,
I'm happy to run with that. That makes sense. So carry on.
And it makes sense seasonally, doesn't it? And
the odd apple, let's face it, that's organic from the farm isn't going to be a problem. But when you are juicing them all day long, when can you eat 10 apples? Never. Yeah. I could easily drink 10 apples in a pint of apple juice. That's the problem. And I've done the juice diet, Jason Vale or whatever, bought the Ninja and all that, whatever it was called, the Nutribullet. And I remember walking to school with she's 17 now, so she would be 5. So before I did the keto, with terrible, terrible stomach, thinking, it's working. Thinking, this must be good.
It's not working, it's fermenting.
Yeah. But, and I've drank all the greens, Udu greens, retching at the sink. My dad's looking up there. What are you doing? No, this is good. It doesn't look good. Doesn't look good. But I wanted to ask you, I think I've read it in your book, but again, you have to reread a lot because there's a lot to study about melatonin.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've been taking melatonin for it's probably a year and a half, but high dose. And when I say the dose, people go, oh, as if like, oh, you're going to die. And I've just read up on it before, and it's a strong antioxidant, strong anti-cancer, and it doesn't suppress. If I haven't got it, you still have the same. It doesn't make me drowsy at all.
Well, it's not designed to make you drowsy, but the point is you can't sleep unless you have got some melatonin.
Yeah.
But it has another very important role. So there are 2 clear roles. One is it's the sleep hormone to allow sleep, but it's actually synthesized in mitochondria. It's the most important antioxidant in mitochondria. And we know that cancer is a mitochondrial disorder. So when we talk about DNA damage driving cancer, it's DNA damage to the mitochondrial DNA, not the cell DNA. And to say melatonin is very important for mopping up free radicals within mitochondria. And that's where all the free radicals are produced, because it's mitochondria that are generating energy. And I think of free radicals as the exhaust fumes. You could have a perfect car with a perfect fuel, but you're still going to get some exhaust fumes. No biochemistry is perfect. You always get a few exhaust fumes or free radicals. And the melatonin in mitochondria is very good at mopping those up. So very happy for you to take big doses, Alan.
And it's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned. So when we were talking about the glutathione supposedly being the master antioxidant, I think melatonin is probably a bigger player in regards to that.
I agree.
It's and interestingly, that whole pathway is blocked or inhibited at an incredible rate with sugar consumption. When we start to consume too much sugar, that production of serotonin through the neurotransmitter production, all of those things are.
That's one of the things that really stops me having any sugar or temptation in there, because it completely messes my sleep.
Yeah.
Really?
If I have sugar or chocolate or alcohol in the evening, guess I don't these days, I know I'm going to have a rotten night's sleep.
A lot of people say that the carbs, if they have carbs or sugar, would lower cortisol, would raise dopamine, would raise serotonin, and let them relax more. So you just said...
But that's an addiction mechanism. That's not a nourishing mechanism.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting when we look at, you mentioned serotonin there, for example. The reason serotonin is increased when we consume the sugar is that when insulin is increased, insulin will pull all of the nutrients from circulation, the glucose, amino acids, except for tryptophan, which goes on to make the serotonin. So this is why we see an increase in serotonin. And obviously the dopamine response, the downregulation then of the prefrontal cortex, all these mechanisms that go on behind the scene. But every time after we've overexpressed, we start to downregulate. This is why we need more and more. But I think part of the sleep issue is probably to do with people who come into this way of living, start to suffer with some form of hypoglycemia, because maybe they're not transitioning right, and then the sugar can help offset that. But there are ways and means around doing that, and it's usually to do with increase in protein. I eat just before bed. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Sarah, but I eat pretty late. I eat generally 2 to 3 hours before I go to bed, but I've got no qualms with eating just before bed. And the reason I do this is that I find that breakfast is, if I want to store fat, if I want to gain weight, I eat breakfast. One, because it fuels cravings through the rest of the day. But when we wake in the morning, cortisol is elevated along with glucose, insulin. Insulin is the driver of fat storage. And then if I want to gain weight, I eat breakfast. I tend to fast until late afternoon or evening. I'll eat 1 to 2 meals a day. I do find that generally 2 to 3 works best for women as they're gravitating into this way of living. And then as they've been living it for a prolonged period of time, I find that they function really well on 1 to 2 also. But I eat close to bed. And if we look at the lion in the wild, that's what do they do after they've just eaten their food?
They go to sleep, yeah.
They go to sleep.
Yeah.
You know, it's and I feel fantastic. I sleep. If I don't eat close to bed, and this is what many people will stop eating around 4 5 p.m., not go to bed until 9 10 p.m., and then they wonder why maybe they're suffering with some form of hypoglycemia or issues with sleeping.
Everybody is so different, Richard. I mean, the most important thing is that we do time restricted eating. Because after 16 hours of no food, you switch on autophagy or self-eating. And that's the spring cleaning that mops up all the cancer cells and the broken down cells and the detritus that accumulates in our body. And everybody's very different. So, every 3 months I do a 3-day fast. And so when I'm fasting at that, and of course it's very easy to do when you're ketone, I find I actually sleep better. So it illustrates the point that we're all very different. And, I always think that, teaching medicine is like playing cricket, It's the rules of the game are the same for everybody. The tools of trade are the same. Everybody's got a cricket bat and a patch of grass and all that. But everybody plays it differently to get a result.
Right.
And so it is in real life. We know what the rough rules of the game are. We know it's got to be low carb, ideally carnivore, a few supplements, detox regime. But everybody can play the game within that to fine-tune a regime that makes sure they've got good quality sleep, function well with lots of brain and physical energy.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm a big fan of fasting. I don't know if we spoke about this. Yeah, have you tried dry fasting?
No.
I couldn't
do any fasting for more than 2 hours when I was a carb eater. I remember I wanted to apply for Bear Grylls' TV show one time, and the missus said, "You will kill somebody on that island if you don't eat." And then I went keto, and this is 10 years ago, and fasting became the rage then, the book of fasting with Jason Fung, and I read all them. And I thought, I'll try it. So I missed the breakfast, and I missed it. And I did 48 hours twice. And I even went to the gym as well and trained, and I was fine. And the second day was easier than the first.
Yeah, you probably know the experience of Dr. Ian Lake, who is an NHS GP, type 1 diabetic, so he has insulin, based in Stroud. Now he's adopted ketogenic diet for 15 years, 20 years. Blood sugars, very well controlled. He did a 5-day fast during which he ran 20 miles every day, along with Matthew Pinsent, I think, who's also a type 1 diabetic. And his dose of insulin was absolutely constant. His blood sugars were absolutely constant. He didn't suffer at all. So ketogenic diet is the treatment for type 1 and type 2 diabetics. And it's, the metabolism just looks after itself. It's just 100%. A brilliant diet.
Yeah. I remember you saying about, it was Matthew Morton that ran the 100.
Yes.
And I checked it. And on one of your episodes somewhere, you said he ran 175 kilometers. So I checked. It was 175 miles. Yeah, it was 275 kilometers.
Correct. Yeah.
And in 24 hours, I mean, that's 6-minute miles.
And didn't need to eat. He had to have water and electrolytes. No, absolutely incredible.
Well, this is what we see with the athletes that I work with. Obviously, I work with people who suffer with hormonal issues, type 2 diabetes. As a nutritionist, I work across the board. But obviously, this is, in my opinion, the best way for athletic performance. And a good friend of mine came to see me as a vegan, now carnivore. He's a triathlete. He's European champion as an amateur. And he competes in these events now, carb-free. So he recently ran a 2-hour 36 marathon, 0 carb. He competes, Mikey, my little girl shouting in the background, Mikey, that's right. She knows. Mikey is... He's completed like a 4-hour 11 70.3, which is half Ironman. He's again the Welsh record holder. He's the fastest Welshman ever to complete Kona, which is the world championships in Ironman, at 9 hours 11. And we think on a flat course he would have done well under. He probably would have taken 30 minutes off that. And again, he does all of his training 0 carb, and he competes at a very high level, 0 carb. And we've experimented with carb doses also. But it just shows that the body, it's incredibly intuitive, and it can make, well, we know it makes glucose, and contrary to popular belief, when you're adapted, it doesn't do it through the stress pathways that people will claim that it does. So, but the body is an incredible machine. And just to revert back to what you were mentioning about the fasting, Sarah, in regards to autophagy, the beauty is for us on this call, being ketogenic, we are always eliciting some form of autophagy and mitophagy, brown fat activation, increased lipolysis, insulin sensitivity. So we are constantly in that, and it's not an on-off switch as people think. It's more of like a sliding scale, isn't it? Where everything's always activated. But the longer that we fast, max autophagy for us, we can achieve a lot sooner than having to fast for these prolonged periods of time. But when we do, my goodness, I generally fast daily. And I don't think about it. I don't force a fast. So, I mean, generally, I'm 24 hours without eating. Recently, and this shocked many people when I was live, I forgot to eat for 2 days. So I honestly, we do the lives, as you two know, quite late, and I eat quite late. I had a podcast or something booked in after the live. It was too late to eat. So I thought, well, I'll just go to bed. I'll eat in the morning. I missed breakfast. I didn't feel the need to eat. And the same thing happened the following night. I literally went over 48 hours because I forgot to eat. I had the hunger pangs, but as they start to set in, as you guys know, 20 minutes after, and they've
You wouldn't do that when you was a carb eater and a bodybuilder. No chance. No, I don't know how long we have got, but I'd love to ask you. I know your opinion, but I'd like to tell you the story. When my mom's 80 this summer, doesn't take any medication, nothing. I said I would love to bring her up to your farm for the little teaching that you give there. That would be fantastic. That's her favourite place as well, is Mid Wales. Actually, she used to go there with my dad in their little mobile home. Whereabouts are you in Wales? Is it Mid Wales where you are?
Yes, Mid Wales, Knighton, Prestine.
That's a favourite place. So I'll have to bring.
I'd love to come also. If you don't mind.
We should arrange that.
So
it's her 80th in July. So
fantastic.
When she was 50, maybe 51, the doctor put her on a statin. Within 2 days, she couldn't walk.
Wow.
And she actually, I remember it. She had to get up and walk backwards like a crab. And my dad's like, what the hell? That must be them tablets. Throw them away. And that's what he was like. Yeah, rubbish, gone. And he would listen to her. So she would listen to him. So she threw them away. 2 days later, back to normal. And she never took them again. So I think she was quite lucky to have such a strong negative side effect. Otherwise, she might have stayed on them.
Dr. Asim Malhotra reckons about 50% of the population get such a severe side effect with statins. And in the chronic fatigue and the ME patients I see, none of them can tolerate statins. They're an absolute disaster for their muscles.
Because it gets rid of CoQ10, which is another thing to recommend. And I take that. And you also B6 niacinamide, you recommend?
Essential for mitochondria.
Yeah, I've got all that. I've got the whole package.
Yeah, fantastic. Brilliant. Guys, obviously conscious of Sarah's time, so we'll knock it on the head there. But Sarah, absolute pleasure to get you on as always. I'd love to get you back on. I think I think you'd love to get
amazing. Yeah. And 100%. Everybody who's coming to the retreat, Dr. Sarah will be live on Zoom answering questions and educating us some more. So super excited for you to be part of it. Thank you.
Can't wait.
And I might get my internet sorted out by then, so it'll be even better.
Brilliant.
Hopefully it works out there. So I have to test that.
Sarah, where can people find you?
My website, just drmyhill.co.uk, and there are links to courses, Zooms, things, retreats, whatever you fancy. So that's the best bet.
Brilliant. And I will pop all of those links below. Brilliant. Thank you both. Absolute pleasure chatting as always. Take care, and I will see you guys soon.
Thank you.
Look forward to. Cheers. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.